I hate robbing banks.
War is a universal language. I know a renegade soldier when I see one. Never occurred to me that one might come from above. Space invasion, big car chase. Truth be told, I was ready to hang it up till I met you today.
Carol Danvers becomes one of the universe's most powerful heroes when Earth is caught in the middle of a galactic war between two alien races. Written by Anne Boden, Ryan Fleck, and Geneva Robertson Dwart, based on a story written by Nicole Perlman, Meg LaFleur, Anne Boden, Ryan Fleck, and Geneva Robertson Dwart, directed by Anne Boden and Ryan Fleck, Marvel's Captain Marvel, which sounds kind of redundant when I put it that way, but okay.
That was a mouthful, boy. There was a lot of hands in this soup, wasn't it?
So, Joe, see, I kind of feel like I'm going to start with you on this one because I've been kind of feeling a little bit of tension, shall we say, with regards to the movie with you, and I'm kind of wanting to feel how you're feeling about this movie. Joe, what is your initial impressions about this movie?
Well, before I get into my initial impressions, I will say, yeah, tensions were, I was a little on edge, and honestly, it's because this film, leading up to its release, and I don't think I've ever seen a Marvel movie with so much controversy, and, you know, is it warranted? Is it fair that it's been so controversial? Well, I guess that depends on your personal point of view. There was a part of me that was very tempted to say, Brie Larson, out of respect for you, as an old white guy, I will not review your movie.
Am I saying that I hate white dudes? No.
It was there. I mean, that kind of, is this going to be the first woke Marvel movie, was really there, and a lot of people were very nervous that many a franchise has been ruined by not so much the agenda, but just what people think they need to do to service the agenda, which I sort of feel like is very self-defeating, and if maybe my understanding of it is very different. So this idea that you need to Mary Sue your characters because of a fearfulness to show weakness in your female characters, I find to be just completely wrong. That's not how you develop a character, and that's not how you show strength and heroism, by just putting no obstacles in front of them.
No.
So that was my fear going in. Is this going to be one of those kinds of a deal? I'm happy to say that I did not feel that way at all. I felt that they did treat this character well, that this is a character you should bring your children to, that you should bring your daughters to see. It was not a character without obstacles. So, yeah, my initial impression of the film is that it was great. I tried to stay completely spoiler free, and I tried to avoid reviews going in. I did get a sense that there was some lukewarmness around this film, and I wasn't getting that. I was very happy with it. I thought it was terrific. I think that a lot of people are going to compare it to Wonder Woman as being the first female Marvel film, and I think Wonder Woman might have it over this film in certain respects. But for the most part, I thought this was a dynamite film. I was very happy with it, and it's still very fresh, by the way. Mm-hmm. So all of this is. I mean, when I say fresh, I mean like a half an hour ago fresh. Like I literally just left the theater, came home, and set up. So yeah, it's still very fresh. But again, my initial feeling was that it was a solid Marvel film. They have come through yet again. My girlfriend felt the same way, and I kind of felt like she was, again, if you want to talk about the target audience, she was certainly the target audience. She was happy with it. The soundtrack was great. As a child of the 90s, I loved every bit of the soundtrack. So yeah, I'm pleased. I am very pleased, and it is a different kind of a character, I think. So it'll be, and we'll get into the subtleties of that. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in terms of the greater Marvel universe, and of course with Avengers Endgame. So yeah, color me impressed and pleased.
This was a wonderful movie. I enjoyed it immensely. I did kind of walk in kind of with my fingers crossed. The story of Carol Danvers is an extremely long and complicated one. She has an amazingly rich and rather dark backstory. The bottom line is, was it entertaining? Did the characterization of Carol Danvers make sense? Did the side plots work? Yes. Yes, they did. I felt like this movie was even better than I anticipated, and I kind of had high hopes for it, to be honest with you. I thought the character of Carol was well cast, was well acted. I thought that Samuel L. Jackson was just on point throughout like most of the movie. The visual effects were good. The fights were great. Its lead-in into Avengers Endgame, I felt worked. There is a lot to like. There's one or two things like not completely solid about it, but a solid outing, especially for a character that outside of the comic world nobody really knows about. It didn't go out. It didn't actually like sit there and say to itself, "We're here to subvert expectations." No, it just did. It just did it, and it did it in a logical way. We're gonna get to that when we get to the spoilers aspect of things, but I liked it a lot, and I'm very happy. I'm very satisfied with it, and there's not really much else to say. For people who are watching the video podcast, this is your point. We liked the movie. We recommend you see the movie. From this point forward, we are going to be discussing spoilers. So, enter at your own risk.
The Krull are good guys?
Yes. Well, not necessarily good. The Skrulls... The Skrulls are complicated. The Skrulls are complicated, even in the Marvel comics. Okay, the general gist of the story of the famous war between the Kree and the Skrulls is that they're basically both bad guys, but they're both the biggest bad guys in the galaxy. At least that's how it was in the comic. Now here they kind of changed that up a little bit. They made the Skrulls more of a refugee style status characters instead. Which, all right, it goes against comic canon, but I didn't really mind it as much. But yes, in the comic books, they were actually both villains. But in both cases, there were aspects within each group that were good people, and have helped out the Avengers, or have been helped by the Avengers before. In this particular case, they decided to go with the idea of the Talos character being a good guy, because I originally thought that this was going to lead into the Secret Invasion. So I was a little disappointed in that respect that the Skrulls seem to be neutered, I guess would be the best way to say. Kind of a little bit neutered from the comic book. How'd you like Goose?
Well, okay, that's... well, I still sort of wonder why they bothered to change his name to Goose, because again, they... Do you think that maybe Disney was worried about being a little overly self-congratulatory by focusing on the fact that his name is Chewie? Oh, we own the rights to Chewie too, by the way, so we can do what we want. Or do you think they were trying to just sort of update the character for the 90s?
I think it was more about reminding the audience that this is a female pilot from the 80s and 90s. And honestly, any pilot from the 80s, from the late 80s, early 90s is a Top Gun fan. So...
Right.
But here's the interesting part. Technically speaking, Carol didn't name the cat. That was Lawson that named the cat.
There you go. And that's kind of what I was sort of trying to get at. First of all, right, where did this cat come from if it's not a cat? If it's a full-blown alien, why is it named Goose? Why does it seem to know Carol? Like, I mean, the implication was that, at least I think so, that this was Carol's cat before?
In the comics, it was supposed to be Carol's cat. In this particular one, they made a couple of changes to the origin, and since we're in that area, I'll cover it a little bit. First of all, Lawson being Marvel is absolutely from the comic. All they did was change the gender, and I'm okay with that. That's not a big deal. You don't need to even think about that. But there is a much deeper, richer background between Lawson and Carol's character that they didn't get a chance to. They were actually very close. And it's been implied, and I don't remember correctly, but I think that at one point they actually had a relationship on top of them being co-workers. So obviously they didn't go for that here. The fact that they didn't really cover a lot of the relationship between her and Lawson, I think, was a detriment to the movie, because it would have explained more why she may have decided to name the cat Goose, or maybe there's a cut scene where Carol names the cat Goose because the cat takes a liking to her after meeting her or something. Who knows? Weirdly, that to me is kind of a loose end. It's 100% absolutely positively that is Lawson's cat, or Flecknar. I don't remember exactly what it is. Sorry.
Flurgan?
Yeah, something like that.
Mother Flurgan.
And, we're in spoilers, so might as well. The fact that Goose is the one that takes Nick Fury's eye.
Yeah, that's
a
a thing we can talk about.
You need to keep both eyes open.
People I kind of feel like people are very wary of fan service, quote unquote fan service. And they're like, most people get very abrasive to it. I don't mind it so much as long as it's handled right. So I guess there was going to be at least a few nods in here to, future events. How did this happen? How did that happen? So as soon as the cat scratched the eye and he goes, "Oh, don't worry, it's just a scratch," you're kind of already going, and I like this girl goes, "Oh no," or something or other. Like that was, it was funny, handled pretty well, but then again, you're kind of going, so that's how Nick Fury lost his eye and had to wear an eye patch or whatever. Okay.
My problem with it was, until that point, the cat gave no indication of hostility to him. And then just all of a sudden, slash!
Right. Exactly, yeah. Is it a poison slash, for one thing? And yeah, you're absolutely right. The cat is friendly and cute. And of course, you do a flashback to the again, if you're uber nerds like us, my first thought went to Winter Soldier. The last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye. Which I guess now sort of means that he trusted the cat. Who would have thought? Okay, yeah, and it's almost like, again, trying to subvert expectations. If he lost it in the heat of battle in some way, that would have been a little too fine. Okay, I guess that's fair too. So this was kind of a funny way to do that. Yay,
but weirdly, it's also fitting in with his character as he grew. Because as he grew, he became distrustful of everybody, and his whole raison d'etre was lies and half-truths and ways of getting to the end that he is looking for. I just don't think it was very effective, and I think, if anything, it undercut that line from Winter Soldier now. Because it made him out to be like a little whiny little brat. I figured something like a major turning point of betrayal, that the loss of that eye should have been. This is the implication I got when I was watching Winter Soldier, that it was the loss of that eye that was the major turning point that made him just come in and just be the Nick Fury that we know today. And then it turns out to be this. A little lame, guys. A little lame. Well, let's talk for a second. Let's talk about Brie Larson as Carol Danvers.
No.
I felt that, with the way the story was in the beginning, with her constantly on edge and repressive and everything, and just not really showing a lot of emotion, I think they kind of explained that well, but I feel like it almost was a detriment to the character, because then by the time she actually does come out of her skin, so to speak, and become herself, you're kind of already used to the dour, I'm focused, I'm holding myself together, I'm holding it all in, I'm not reacting or anything like that. I feel like that kind of overpowered her character. And I'm not blaming Brie Larson necessarily for that act, because I kind of felt when she was loosening up a little bit, she was better. I just kind of feel like they kind of wrote the character in a corner with this particular method of storytelling, especially because they wanted to add the memory loss problem as well.
Yeah, true. I thought she was fine. I really didn't have much problem with her, and I did walk in trying desperately to forget everything that I had heard
No.
and really kind of go in fresh. And I did try to tell him, again, let's focus on this film and I thought she did fine. I really didn't have much of an issue with her portrayal. I did but I did say to myself, okay, it's not bad, but why Brie Larson? Why is she the one you chose for this character? Was there something specifically about her? And I remember thinking, like, I just kind of don't know why they went down that road, because I feel like this was a character, like you said, if she's holding it in, and then there's some sort of explosion of release and an explosion of character, I wasn't necessarily getting that either. And I remember kind of looking back at her career, thinking to myself, like, well, if I think about what she's done before, I find it to be an odd choice. And it was like I was waiting to find out why Brie Larson is the character, the actress to play such an important character. And I wasn't getting it. I wasn't really understanding it. But again, I'll give it a solid not bad. And I felt that she had enough likability. I wouldn't say charisma, but I will say likability, that you did sort of get behind the character and you were happy to sort of be with her through the journey. So I didn't find anything wrong with her at all. Again, just not a powerhouse of presence either.
She was good. She wasn't. I didn't expect her to knock it out of the park or anything like that. I kind of was missing. I guess I was kind of missing, like, the stand tall Carol. Like, they didn't really get to that Carol until the end of the movie. In fact, I'm going to go out and say that we didn't see the Carol Danvers that I've been looking for until the first cutscene. I think her standing there looking at Scarlett Johansson saying, "Where's Nick Fury?" is the most Captain Marvel I saw throughout the entire movie. Firm, assured, confident. I felt that was the closest we've gotten to her character as portrayed in the comic.
The bond between her and Nick Fury was, for sure, I think, the most likable part of the film. I mean, that did carry a lot of weight. By the way, I loved the scene where he's in the car with Coulson, and then suddenly Coulson calls on the phone. And he's like, "Where's everybody?"
That was an awesome surprise.
It really was. I did not expect that. There was a couple of those little moments too, where you think like they would, very good surprises.
There were a lot of nice little surprises to this movie. Surprised that by the way, just so that we understand one of the things, I like what they did with the character. I like where they're going with the character. I felt that they were faithful to the comic book, as faithful as they could possibly be. They even managed to cover the amnesia years of Carol, which originally was due to Rogue. That's how Rogue gets her power of flight, because she stole Carol Danvers' powers from her temporarily. So they couldn't do that, obviously.
Okay,
Rogue, of course, being a mutant. So they couldn't do that with this movie here. But I still felt they handled it very well. I don't mind the Krees being like the quote-unquote super duper bad guys, because I never liked the Kree to begin with. I always thought they were a bunch of arrogant, snobby little sons of bitches. So screw those guys. I don't mind that at all.
The other big kind of a plot hole, or I could be wrong, the Tesseract. Which I thought was a nice little twist, by the way, when they kind of try to figure out what the source is something else and yada yada yada. I mean, basically the engine on this ship she's flying would be similar to the technology that Hydra was developing in Captain America: The First Avenger, right? Using the Tesseract as the source and using that power. I thought that was interesting. And I liked that little surprise. With that said, I thought the Tesseract apparently now is sitting on Nick Fury's
According to the final
desk.
cutscene, yes.
Yeah. So, okay, what am I missing? We had it in Avengers. They found it at the end of First Avenger. It comes in. Right. And it comes back into play in the opening of the Avengers because Nick Fury had it all along. Now, again, like I said, this movie's fresh in my mind, and I'm already going back, like, no time to kind of go back and remember this and research this. So that's why they were tinkering with it in the beginning of the first Avengers, because Nick Fury had it all along.
Okay, so there's not a real clear timeline on this. The last time from the timeline, the Tesseract was in that place in Sweden, I think it was, and it was taken by Red Skull. Then it was on the plane that Cap was in. It transported the Red Skull to Vormir, and then fell through the ship and into the ice. The next time we see it, it is in the hands of Howard Stark, who's looking for Cap. But he's not interested in it anymore. He's trying to find Cap. So they find it, and that's where it last lives. The next time we see it in the cinematic universe, in the timeline from that, if we're going from starting from the 1940s till today, the next time it appears now is on that Kree ship that Marvel had built, powering the drive that they were trying to come up with.
Okay,
that's a story.
So
that's
how
not
did
known
she
yet.
get it?
So my personal,
all right,
my idea is, since she infiltrated and was working on Earth, it's possible that the Kree found out that the Tesseract was on Earth and sent Marvel to try to do the experiments there on Earth, away from the Kree homeworld, in case anything went bad. Because if it destroyed Earth, they wouldn't have cared if it destroyed Earth. So that's what my feeling is. So she came in, she infiltrated, and eventually was able to work her way up to getting her hands on the Tesseract for scientific experiments. That's where I think it is.
And so as opposed to finding it, grabbing it, and running, she finds it, infiltrates S.H.I.E.L.D., and just says, well, let me tinker with it right here.
Because it's a dangerous artifact.
All right, okay.
Her justification, on top of not wanting the Supreme Intelligence to really know what she's trying to do, but she could justify it as, we don't know what the power of this thing is. You don't want me to bring it to Hela and experiment with it, and gosh forbid if anything bad goes happen, it could destroy all of Hela. Who cares if we destroy these Earthlings, these backwards Earthlings?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, that part I have no problem with. I guess
this is supposition.
So it was in the possession of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah, and it was in possession of S.H.I.E.L.D. the whole time. So, I mean, that does sort of... And it's now the first time Nick Fury has become aware of it.
A relatively low-level agent. I like this movie a lot. It's not perfect. It's, got its problems. But on a whole, it's very likable. The character is very likable. The people and the actions and the stories, and it was a likable, enjoyable romp. I had just worked a 12-hour shift when I watched this movie, and I stayed awake throughout the entire thing. That's as good a sign as ever that I really enjoyed it, because the last couple of times I tried that, I fell asleep during the movies. I gave this movie an 8. A very high 8. Is it perfect? No, it's not. Did it have a lot to cover? Yes, it did. And I felt it covered it relatively well, but just from the debate back and forth that Joe and I had, you can see that there are some pieces that are missing. And the one thing that the Marvel movies have done very well is, even if they've slightly introduced a character, they still gave them a self-contained story with a beginning, middle, and end, and not a lot to have to really delve into plot-wise with the outside universe. This movie is really the first one that I've ever feel that it ever kind of feels like it's almost overshadowed by the outside plot of the Marvel universe. Like it has no choice because of its time frame, or because how it's kind of trying to be, a before picture, a prequel of sorts. Hard to really say, but it shouldered the weight okay. It didn't shoulder it perfectly. And I could easily have been convinced to make this a 9, but I think a high 8 is quite respectable for a movie that, frankly, I wasn't 100% sure which way it was going to go.
My friend, sometimes I marvel at the fact, pun not intended, just how similar in our thought patterns we are. I am also going to give this an 8, and I honestly feel that I could have been persuaded to give it a 9. I also agree that this was a terrific film. It was a lot of fun. I liked there was a lot of good surprises in it. There were twists and turns, frankly, that I did not expect. And yeah, I thought the whole thing was very satisfying. And honestly, just to kind of wink at the controversial part of it, or the perceived controversy, I honestly felt that I genuinely feel that this film did not pander to anyone. It did not even really do anything differently in terms of Mary suing this character, which I was, again, that was what I was nervous about. I was very nervous that they were not going to put any obstacles in front of this character for fear of, again, the wrong-headedness when they do that to female characters nowadays, is that they're afraid to give them any imperfections for fear of alienating a certain base that will say, but you made the character do this, and that's... Look, a good character has flaws. A good character has things that they need to overcome. I think they did that with this film. I mean, I will simply say that I think that the character could have been done as a male. The script would have worked fine, but it does work better, the fact that it's a female character. I think the chemistry with certain characters, the what ifs, work better because it's a female character. If there was one or two little things that I kind of thought were like kind of shots at male characters that I kind of think did not make any sense, but I think that was very, very minor, and very downplayed, and worked just fine. One of them I thought was a little silly and unnecessary, and I didn't quite understand it. But again, I thought the whole story was terrific. I think this character is a welcome addition to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it got me very excited to see what's going to play out in the next Avengers film. So yeah, I think the high 8 is very warranted. Who asked me? I tell you what, honestly, and again, it's all very fresh, but I didn't have a whole lot of time to really sort through it, but the two things that come to mind, and again, pretty minor points, but it is fresh in my mind, so I'll go for it. There were two moments in the film that I thought kind of bashed men, and I didn't quite understand why. There was a theme that, again, they're trying to make her overcome, and I liked the idea. There was a moment toward the end when they said, well, you're just an earthling, or something to that effect. And it was at that moment where they did a cut of flashes of her standing up after falling down. That was terrific. I liked that. In that theme, they implied that her father was a rotten, no good SOB. And there were two moments, one where they show another pilot saying to her, you know why they call it the cockpit, don't you? And I'm like, all right, I get it, whatever. Anytime they have to knock some other character to elevate a character, I think that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But that wasn't even the worst offender. The worst offender was the guy who pulls up on the motorcycle and like says something like, hey, Toots, give me a smile or whatever. And I kind of thought what was funny about that was that I had a flashback of that stupid Gillette ad.
Smile, sweetie.
Come on.
Is that a thing that I don't know about? Like guys telling women to smile? And then when I saw it here, I went, hey, there's that thing again. Like maybe that's a thing that I don't know about. But again, it just seemed,
Bro, not cool.
like, again, oddly out of place, and I didn't know what it contributed. Except for the fact that maybe you're not supposed to feel bad when she steals the motorcycle. That's the only thing I could come up with for that, because I kind of thought otherwise it made zero sense. All right, I didn't get that. So again, those are the little moments that sort of stuck out at me and kind of said, okay, was that necessary? Did that propel this character? Not so much. Not in my opinion. But but again, that's a pretty minor thing, all things considered.
To respond to that for just briefly, number one, I actually have heard and seen guys try to pick up women with like, yo, smile. It's a dated thing, which is actually part of the reason why I'm going to slightly refute this. It's your opinion. You're absolutely entitled to it. The movie is supposed to take place in 1989. In 1989, the scene where the guy says it's called the cockpit for a reason. In 1989, women in the Air Force could be trained, but weren't allowed to actually get into fighter planes. They were supposed to be handling cargo and stuff like that. It was still a new thing during that time frame for women to be pilots. So I didn't mind the cockpit line that much at all because it felt very appropriate for the time frame. For me, honestly, Goose taking Nick Fury's eye. Why? I really, I was kind of hoping that they were teasing like something like that was going to happen, and it was just going to be like a MacGuffin or something like that. That wasn't actually what it is. That maybe he got shot, and the cat's scratch was what kept him alive or something like that, but he lost his eye in the process, or I don't know. I would have taken anything other than this sweet little cat that he basically babied throughout the entire movie, and the cat was kind of like, hey, you know what? I kind of like this. Fuck you!
This is going to be a weird one, but honestly, and I almost feel like a lot of people might kind of roll their eyes and think just the opposite of what I'm about to say, but I thought it was pretty cool that they brought in the Tesseract as the MacGuffin here. And again, I feel like a lot of people might be going like, but dude, every single solitary bad thing that happens in these movies is because of the Infinity Stones in some way or another. And now they're going back to the Tesseract again. Yeah, that's true. But again, I like how they fit it into the timeline of the whole universe at this point. And again, it genuinely took us to talk about it for me to kind of sort of get that, get my head around that and to see, well, did it work? And I'm kind of convinced that it did. So I think that was a nice little twist, the way, again, to include the bigger Marvel universe into this self-contained story. So I kind of thought that was a nice little wink and a nice little treat, for lack of a better way to say it. And again, I kind of feel like that's for your consideration, because I think it's getting increasingly difficult to work stories that will fit into the Marvel timeline without, again, causing problems somewhere else. So I think that's just pretty damn impressive. And I kind of feel like I wanted to say that instead of saying how they didn't screw up or they didn't give us something, a girl power story that could have easily gone off the rails.
For me, there was a lot to like about this movie. I felt the visual effects were pretty good. There were a handful of moments where when Carol was flying around that I thought were a little bit dicey. I thought the performances were all good. I thought the screenplay was pretty solid, not perfectly solid. And I normally try not to highlight something like a special effect or something like that, but after the Oscar debacle where frickin' Infinity War lost to First Man, I'm going to give a shout out to the brilliant special effect geniuses that took 20 years off the life of Clark Gregg and Samuel L. Jackson. Because to date, and this is probably the most it's been used in any movie. Normally it's just been like little glimpses here and there, in small spots. This is the best that I have ever seen it. Thanks for watching our review of Captain Marvel. Please check out some of our other shows. Please like and subscribe. Please ring the bell. Please come back sometime. Have a nice day.